One thing that's worth talking about on that side of things is, well, unfortunately, we have to get to it, but it's about greenwashing. Obviously, we've seen recently that Coca-Cola sponsoring the COP27, which is extremely controversial given that they've been labeled as the world's top polluter by many. And I think 99% of the energy that they use to produce their plastic comes from fossil fuels. So it doesn't look good on the surface. Like, do you see this as blatant greenwashing? And if so, like, should marketers make these sorts of decisions be punished, or how can they sort of be dissuaded from thinking that it's okay to sort of promote a brand when the reality to promote Coca-Cola, for example, as something sustainable when the reality is something different?
Yeah. I, like most people, have been around the world on this one and changed my opinion 3 or 4 times, I think. And full disclosure, I like drinking Coca-Cola and drink a lot of it. So I don't practice what I preach. So there we go. We've all got our own sort of vices. First of all, is it blatant greenwashing? First of all, I thought yes. Now I think no. I think I've written some notes down. So if I look down at my screen, because I think it's a really complex topic to talk on, and I want to articulate that in the way that I do. First of all, Coca-Cola, I think, do a lot of interesting work in the sustainability space. Whether you or I or anybody thinks that's good or not is something maybe we should go on and talk in further, particularly if you're speaking on from the viewpoint of someone who's younger than me or someone who's in the sort of the early stages of their career. But there's a really interesting book called Chief Sustainability Officers at Work. And within that, there's a chapter written by their Senior Vice President and Chief Communications, Sustainability and Strategic Partnerships Officer, Beatrice Perez. And within that, Beatrice Perez talks an awful lot about what their sustainability strategy is and that recognition of perhaps where they've come from and where they can do better locally. So, for example, areas where there's water, where areas that really struggle with clean water, they spend an awful lot of time investing in the water infrastructure there because they're a huge consumer of water as an organization. So anyway, I'd recommend reading that for anybody who wants to sort of get a bit of a sort of grounding in it. And then, like, is it greenwashing? So it's not just Coca-Cola that's caught my eye and COP27. It's also Shell and their sponsorship of British cycling recently. So that's a really sort of controversial sponsorship as well, which makes me think about the language around this. And I think that's really important because both of us have used this word sponsorship either on purpose or because it's the easiest word for us to choose. And I think, like, with that word sponsorship, loads of assumptions can come in that someone's given money for the association of good or the association of what that thing means. And I think, you know, I like to think that Coca-Cola and Shell or anybody else who perhaps has sponsored something doesn't necessarily want to take over the positive global associations like cycling more or the meeting of all of our global leaders to discuss how they're going to save the planet from the likes of massive organizations that may have got us here in the first place. I think it's possibly a very heavy-handed, not particularly well thought out exchange of money for some sort of value exchange where perhaps British Cycling or COP have called them their sponsors and put their brand over things, and it isn't a particularly good look, which has made people a bit sort of yucky about it. So it's almost like there needs to be a new model for these organizations who do want to do better, who have the financial resources to do better and can do great for the world going forward, to somehow engage with the themes in and around organizations that are already doing better, and how can they lift that up with the resources available to them. And then I thought about like our perspectives, and I was like, I wonder whether you and I sitting here in the UK with very sort of sorry to assume, but we've kind of both studied in the UK. I feel like we've both grown up here. You sound like you're much more traveled than I am, but we have quite a narrow view potentially of like what is quite a complex global issue. And we only ever see one sort of small part of that. And we have a preconception of what Coca-Cola is, what they do, what impact they've done on the planet, and and what COP27 is, and the same for Shell Cycling and anyone else. So I don't have an answer to that. But I just thought it's always worth bearing in mind for anyone who's thinking about is a brand greenwashing, and kind of seeing it from perhaps the point of view of someone in Nigeria or America, and perhaps there's a completely different set of associations in and around that. And then this other piece around, maybe it's where I should have started with this, because it's what I mentioned in the book, is about the book, is that some people do think that Coca-Cola is doing an awful lot of good things for environmental impact. And others don't. I'm somewhere in the middle, because I read that book a couple of weeks ago, and I feel like I understand better about where Coca-Cola might be coming from with their sponsorship. But I suppose what it highlighted to me was that there's no consistency. No one knows what good looks like. There's no benchmarks or reporting requirements that consistently let us as marketers judge whether something is a good transaction of value, other than we go, has it increased Coca-Cola's brand value? Has it decreased COP27's brand perceptions? And those are old ways of judging something at a strategic brand management level, when perhaps we should be thinking in those different ways we spoke of earlier, of when you look at marketing through a lens, what does good look like? Perhaps there isn't the language or the benchmarks to do that yet. Maybe this is a point on that journey where you and I are talking about it and other people are talking about it, but maybe that's what's born out of this. That's the opportunity perhaps for us to do better at COP28, COP29, and for Coca-Cola to learn, or for Shell, or for any brand to learn, any brand that thinks they might want to sponsor COP28. So, yeah, that's my thoughts on it. But I mean, I'd be fascinated to know yours.
Personally, as a young person looking at the impact, especially that Coca-Cola has had, obviously they've had some controversies over the years about their advertising campaigns, and their global impact is quite well known, whether it's for the good or the bad. A lot of young people do find this decision quite difficult to digest and to understand, really. But one element to consider that you mentioned is that despite the fact that they may gain brand sort of awareness, obviously, well, they don't really need it, they're Coca-Cola, but in terms of sort of positive brand perception, it's worth considering that it's an effort that they could be trying to make to help sponsor the COP27, so that they can sort of try to help make things better. Right? People are looking at it from a perspective of, is it just Coca-Cola trying to improve their brand perception? But at the same time, they could actually be trying to improve their brand perception, not in a selfish way, but actually make things better. So it's worth considering that aspect as well. But it on the surface, it really does not look good.
They're almost damned if they do, damned if they don't in this.
Yes.
Aren't they? Because they do have this incredible sort of resource of money and people and all the other bits and pieces and infrastructure. And how does an organization like that, not necessarily Coca-Cola, do things without it looking like a sponsorship piece? It's really hard, isn't it?